Well, the amazing thing to me is that the early film composers, which include Max Steiner, Korngold, and Franz Waxman, came here not having anything to start with, because there was no art form. There was nothing for them to begin with. How do we begin writing score for film? And the early films, when they began talking, really had no scores. So the original Frankenstein, for example, and the original Dracula, these movies, they have a little bit of almost like what I call a needle drop. At the beginning and the end, it's like curtain up music, curtain down music, and that's it. There's no score. The movie's essentially musicless, except for the beginning and the end. And somebody decided somewhere, you know, we could get more out of this than just the curtain up and the curtain down. And I don't know how they began the invention of where to begin. So when Steiner began King Kong, what's amazing to me, it's like I could look back now and I've got thousands of films to think of for influence. But what was he thinking of for his influence? Coming up with an action score to a film and how to approach that. So the incredible thing to me is that Steiner was starting with nothing. He was starting with a blank slate, a new art form that didn't exist. And he had to pull from music and said, well, I'll start here. And he created a language of a narrative. And the narrative meaning the music is telling the story and builds with the action and has dynamics. And that really began, for me, the entire art of film composition, which led then to, of course, right around the same time was The Bride of Frankenstein by Franz Waxman. And that also was stunning in its contribution. And then Korngold began doing these action films in the next decade. You know, Captain Blood and Seawolf and the Adventures of Robin Hood. And now he took it another huge step because he was taking the inspiration of what Steiner had done, but he was turning it into a very precise narrative art form. And that laid out the foundation of what, when you have an adventure movie, if you have an action movie, and you're using an orchestra, I think we still constantly refer back to the template laid out by these composers. First, you know, with Steiner, then with Korngold. There would be no Star Wars without, I don't know if it's, you know, again, I mix up my titles, Captain Blood, or it was, you know, the great Errol Flynn adventure films of the 40s that Korngold scored. And so there's a constant referral back to these early scores, which I think people take for granted, that they just did what seemed obvious. Well, it wasn't obvious for them when they were creating it. It wasn't obvious at all. When you're starting a new form, there's nothing to tell you what to do. And I think it's vastly underrated, the contribution that these early film composers made.